An elderly woman had her purse searched at the corner store. A routine check, the officer claimed. Standard procedure. She never protested, never raised her voice, just watched silently as he emptied her belongings onto the counter. 3 days later, the entire town fell silent. No official announcements, no public protests, just a collective holding of breath, as if everyone simultaneously realized something had been broken, something they'd all pretended not to see. This isn't a story about a theft. It's about a system awakened by a blank piece of paper, about how silence, when wielded strategically, can speak louder than any shout, about how power crumbles not from external force, but from internal exposure, from being seen clearly for what it is. Some revolutions begin with gunfire, with speeches, with dramatic stands against injustice. This one began with a woman who simply refused to speak, and in doing so made everyone else listen. The dash camera footage was grainy, standard issue, poor quality, but it captured everything. Officer Rick Talbert's knuckles whitened as he pressed his forearm against Jerome Williams' throat. The black man's eyes bulged, hands splayed against the patrol car's hood. His young son stood frozen on the sidewalk. "This is how you raise them, right?" Rick spat, glancing at the child. The boy's lips trembled. 7 years old, school backpack still on, watching his father struggle for air. The timestamp blinked in the corner. May 17th, 2013, 10 years ago, before body cameras became mandatory, before departments had diversity training, before consequences. The courthouse steps gleamed under morning light, white marble, clean lines, justice symbolized in architecture. Celeste Monroe climbed each step with measured precision. Her shoes, polished Oxfords, not heels, made no sound. Her vest was charcoal black, tailored, perfect, no badge, no uniform, just a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. Her eyes scanned the entrance, dark irises against darker skin. She'd memorized the layout weeks ago. Each door, each hallway, each potential obstacle. Celeste hadn't spoken a word since entering her car that morning. She didn't need to. Some people built power through noise. She built hers through silence. Officer Rick Talbert stood at the courthouse security checkpoint. 23 years on the force had earned him this cushy assignment. No more street patrols, no more midnight shifts, just respect, authority, control of who entered and who didn't. His eyes narrowed at Celeste. Unrecognized faces were automatic threats. "ID and purpose of visit," he barked, stepping directly into her path. Celeste reached for her portfolio. Rick's hand shot out, blocking her. "Back of the line, near the restrooms." She didn't argue, didn't protest, simply turned and walked to where he pointed. The back, always the back. Rick smirked. Order maintained. In the corner, a young technician adjusted the security camera. Malcolm Chen, 26. First year on the job. His hands moved automatically, tightening screws while his eyes tracked the interaction. The dismissal, the power play. Malcolm's phone was already recording, hidden in his shirt pocket. Lens barely visible. His thumb tapped a button. The video uploaded instantly to an encrypted cloud folder labeled The Watchkeepers. The message attached was simple. Happening now. Courthouse main entrance. Same officer. Malcolm slipped the phone back in his pocket. Invisible. Watching. Just like the others. Celeste stood silently in the back of the line, her file held close to her chest. People avoided eye contact, some out of respect for her privacy, others from discomfort at seeing where she'd been placed. At the racial coding of the line, white faces moved forward, brown ones stayed back, a system so normalized nobody questioned it. Celeste made mental notes of each face, each averted gaze, each silent complicity. She didn't write anything down, didn't need to. Her memory had been her weapon long before her badge ever was. Rick approached her again, shoulders back, chin lifted, the swagger of unquestioned authority. "Let me see what's in that bag." He didn't phrase it as a question. Celeste placed her portfolio on the counter, didn't open it. "I said open it," his voice carried, designed to create an audience, to showcase his control. She remained still, eyes forward, breathing even. His hand slammed down beside her portfolio. When an officer gives you an order, is there a problem here? An older security guard approached. White hair, kind eyes, name tag reading Wilson. Rick's jaw tightened. Just maintaining security protocols, Jim. I've got this line. You can head back to the main entrance. Rick's fingers drummed against the counter. Irritation, challenge, then surrender. Watch this one, he muttered, nodding toward Celeste. Attitude problem. He walked away. Back straight, authority intact. For now. The guard named Wilson offered an apologetic smile. ID, ma'am. Celeste opened her portfolio. Inside was a single file. Red tab. Restricted access. Wilson's eyes widened slightly. Recognition. Go right ahead, ma'am. Sorry for the delay. She nodded once. Gathered her things. Wilson leaned closer. Voice low. He doesn't know, does he? Celeste's expression remained neutral. No one does. That's the point. Her first words of the day. Malcolm watched from his position by the camera, fingers working mechanically on wires while his attention remained elsewhere. On the phone notification vibrating in his pocket. Keep recording. Full documentation needed. The sender's name was simply Observer. The group had no official leader, just watchers, documenters, people tired of looking away. Malcolm adjusted his angle, made sure his lens captured Rick's return to the main entrance, where Celeste was now heading. Inside her portfolio beneath the red-tabbed file lay a collection of photographs. Jerome Williams being pinned against the police car, a young Asian woman with a bloodied lip, an elderly black man on his knees beside his car. 16 incidents, 16 victims, 16 cases where Officer Rick Talbert had been named. 16 times the system had answered with insufficient cause. Celeste knew each name, each date, each injury. She'd spent 6 months memorizing them before accepting her new position, before returning to this courthouse. Rick intercepted her at the main hall junction. His hand caught her sleeve. You need a visitor pass. Where's your visitor pass? His fingers pressed into the fabric of her jacket. Not enough to bruise, just enough to assert control. People streamed past. Some glanced over. None intervened. The choreography of power remained undisturbed. I need to see your court summons, Rick continued. What judge are you seeing? What's your case number? Questions designed not for answers but for obedience. Celeste remained silent. Her stillness agitated him. Silence always agitated the loud. You think you're special, Rick's voice lowered, the public tone vanishing into something more personal, more honest. Think the rules don't apply because of what your expensive suit, your fancy bag. His hand reached for her portfolio. People like you need to understand how things work here. He yanked the portfolio from her grasp, the motion deliberate, practiced. Papers spilled across the marble floor, the photographs, the files, the names. Rick stared down. His expression shifted from satisfaction to confusion. His own name appeared on each document, highlighted in yellow. Defendant Officer Richard Talbert. Malcolm's camera captured the moment perfectly. The realization, the confusion. He pressed record on a second device, a proper camera hidden in his maintenance cart. This moment needed multiple angles, multiple records, because history had taught them all that single testimonies could be erased, but a chorus became harder to silence. Rick's face flushed as he knelt to gather the scattered papers, his movements jerky, defensive. What is this? Some kind of joke, who are you? His fingers closed around Celeste's ID card, which had fallen among the files. The blood drained from his face. Celeste Monroe, Chief of Police, appointed 3 weeks ago. The announcement he'd ignored because who cared? Just another diversity hire. Just another box checked. Just another face he hadn't bothered to remember. The hallway went silent, motion suspended. Courthouse staff who recognized the name froze mid-step. Officers touching their radios instinctively. Administrative assistants sharing glances. Rick remained kneeling, the power dynamic inverted in a single moment. Celeste looked down at him, her expression unchanged. I'm here to observe the cost of silence. 6 words, spoken so quietly only Rick could hear them. 6 words that would haunt him for months to come. She gathered her files methodically. No rush, no anger. Every movement calculated to demonstrate that this encounter was not unexpected, not unplanned. Rick stood slowly, hands hanging uselessly at his sides. The confident posture now collapsed. Chief Monroe, I didn't... She held up one hand, the smallest gesture. Absolute authority. Rick fell silent, and for the first time in his career, he experienced what he'd inflicted on countless others, the powerlessness of being unheard. Malcolm's phone vibrated again. The message simple. It's time. Send everything. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, accessing the secure server, the archive they'd built over years. Not just today's footage, but everything. The Asian woman being called slurs while Rick wrote her a ticket. The black teenager slammed against a wall for looking suspicious. The Hispanic man denied an interpreter while Rick mocked his English. Footage from dash cams that had malfunctioned. From security cameras that had been accidentally turned off. From phones hidden in pockets, in backpacks, in hands pretending to text. All of it uploaded to the internal police server, the courthouse network, local news stations, a digital flood of truth. Celeste walked away, her footsteps echoing in the marble hallway. Behind her, Rick's radio crackled to life, his supervisor's voice tight with urgency. Talbert, report to the security office immediately. People stared as he passed. Something had shifted, the invisible shield of authority suddenly transparent. On the security screen's footage played in sequence. Rick pushing an elderly Asian woman against her car. Rick throwing a teenager's backpack into the street. Rick planting evidence in a stopped vehicle. His face over and over. His badge number clearly visible. His words perfectly captured, no one's watching anyway. But they had been, all along. Celeste entered courtroom 7 exactly on schedule. Her seat in the back row gave her full visibility. This wasn't her case, not officially. She was here for Jerome Williams' civil suit against the department, a case filed 7 years ago. Delayed, dismissed, appealed, delayed again. A case Rick had testified against 4 times. Each time swearing no excessive force had been used. Each time believed without question. Until now. The judge entered. Everyone stood, except Celeste. She remained seated, a small act of defiance, a signal. The prosecutor glanced back, caught her eye. The slightest nod exchanged between them. In her hand, Celeste held a USB drive, unlabeled, unassuming, but containing every second of footage Malcolm had just released. Every second of truth the system had tried to bury. The courthouse Wi-Fi network suddenly slowed to a crawl. Too many devices accessing the same files simultaneously. The footage had gone viral inside the building first. A contained explosion. Bailiffs checking phones during breaks. Clerks watching under desks. Lawyers forwarding links with hushed warnings. Watch this now. Rick's face appeared on hundreds of screens. His actions undeniable. His power evaporating with each new view. In the security office, Rick stared at the monitor. His own face looked back at him from a dozen different angles. Where did these come from, he demanded. These are doctored, they're fake. The security supervisor didn't answer, just pointed to the timestamp on each video. The metadata, the verification codes, all authentic, all preserved exactly as department procedure required, all simply revealed. Who did this? Rick's voice cracked. Who's behind this? The supervisor looked up, expression unreadable. Everyone you thought wasn't watching. Kakintuan. The first news alert appeared on phones throughout the courthouse. Breaking police brutality footage released. Officer Richard Talbert implicated in multiple incidents. Then another new police chief's first-day confrontation caught on camera, and another, the Watchkeepers, anonymous group claims, responsibility for police footage leak. In courtroom 7, the judge called a recess. Too many phones vibrating, too many whispers, too much truth suddenly demanding attention. Celeste sat alone in the empty courtroom during the recess, still, patient. The prosecutor approached, tablet in hand. "Chief Monroe, have you seen what's happening?" She nodded once. "Did you—" The question trailed off, unfinished but clear. "I didn't release anything," Celeste replied. "I merely stopped preventing its release." The prosecutor studied her face, understanding dawning slowly. "The appointment, your first official act, was to remove the digital security protocols that were hiding evidence." Celeste finished. "Not destruction, not tampering, simply transparency. A system reset to its factory settings. Truth by default." Rick was placed on administrative leave by noon. Badge and gun surrendered. He sat in his car in the courthouse parking lot, phone exploding with notifications. Messages from fellow officers. "What did you do?" from friends. "Is that really you in those videos?" from his wife, "Don't come home yet." Reporters are outside. His hand trembled as he scrolled through the footage being shared. His face, his voice, his actions. Things he'd forgotten doing. Things he'd never expected anyone to remember. Malcolm continued his maintenance rounds. Invisible again. Just another worker in the system. His phone contained a new message, Phase 1 complete. 23 officers identified. 17 precincts, one pattern. The Watchkeepers had never been about one officer, or one precinct, or one city. They had been documenting patterns, systems, the architecture of protected abuse. Rick was merely the first thread pulled from a tightly woven fabric. Celeste returned to the courtroom as session resumed. The energy had shifted entirely. The defense attorney for the police department looked ashen, his notes abandoned. Jerome Williams sat straighter at the plaintiff's table, his shoulders no longer curled inward. The judge examined the room with new awareness, as if seeing its imbalances for the first time. In light of new evidence being presented, the judge began, "This court will—" The defense attorney stood. "Your Honor, we request a brief recess to confer with our clients." Translation: to negotiate a settlement before more damage could be done. Celeste exited the courthouse at exactly 5:17 p.m. Reporters had gathered on the steps. Cameras swung toward her, microphones extended like reaching hands. "Chief Monroe, did you orchestrate today's leak?" "Chief Monroe, is this a purge of the department?" "Chief Monroe, what's your response to Officer Talbert's treatment of you this morning?" She paused at the top step, considered each question, then continued walking, silent. Her car waited at the curb, driver's door open, no police escort. She drove herself, always had. The evening news led with the footage, with Rick's face and actions, but also with Celeste's appointment 3 weeks earlier, the first black woman to lead the department, the former internal affairs investigator whose promotion had been announced with minimal fanfare, the quiet professional who had spent years documenting what others pretended not to see. The silence had been strategic, the invisibility deliberate, because revolution doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It arrives on soft feet, in sensible shoes, with perfect documentation. Icon. Rick sat in a bar across town, far from his usual spots. The television above the counter played the footage on repeat, his greatest hits in high definition. He ordered another drink. The bartender placed it down without meeting his eyes. "You seen this asshole?" someone said, nodding toward the screen. Rick stared into his glass, invisible in plain sight, anonymous in his shame. "Yeah," he muttered, "I've seen him." Celeste's apartment was sparsely furnished, minimalist, functional, a desk, a reading chair, bookshelves lined with legal texts and philosophy, no television, no distractions. She placed her portfolio on the desk, removed the files one by one. Jerome Williams. Grace Holloway's son, the Asian woman at the traffic stop. 16 cases. 16 lives interrupted by Rick Talbert. She arranged them in a perfect line, then opened her laptop. A new email waited in her inbox, from an address she didn't recognize but had expected. The watchkeepers welcome you, Chief Monroe. Today was just the beginning. Attached was a single document, a list of 137 officers across the state, each with similar complaints, similar patterns, similar protection. Celeste closed her eyes, inhaled slowly. Day 1 complete. 136 to go. The cost of silence had finally come due, and she intended to collect payment in full. The video spread like wildfire across screens. A digital contagion, unstoppable, relentless. 3 days after the courthouse incident, viewership hit 7 million. Local news became national. National became international. Frame by frame, Rick Talbert's career disintegrated before a global audience. The most damning clip played on repeat, Rick's forearm pressed against Jerome Williams' throat, his voice clear in the audio. This is how you raise them right. The casual cruelty, the performative dominance, the child watching from the sidewalk, a perfect distillation of systemic abuse in 27 seconds. Celeste's office remained a sanctuary of calm amid the storm. No television, no social media alerts, only the methodical review of case files. Her assistant knocked softly. Chief, CNN is calling again, and the mayor wants a statement. Celeste didn't look up from her desk. The same response as yesterday, which is, no comment, I'm reviewing cases. Simple, direct, impenetrable. The department cafeteria fell silent as Rick entered. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Chairs scraped against linoleum as officers found reasons to leave. His administrative leave had ended, insufficient evidence to terminate immediately. Union protection, due process. All the shields he'd hidden behind for years now protecting him from swift justice. Rick approached his usual table. 4 empty chairs surrounded it. A yellow post-it note stuck to the center. You're not feared. You're expired. He crumpled it in his fist, scanned the room for the culprit. 20 faces looked away simultaneously. Malcolm Chen monitored the internal police servers from his workstation in IT, his official job systems maintenance, his actual role, the department's digital memory. His screen displayed a surge in activity. Officers downloading their own body camera footage, reviewing past reports, deleting personal messages, the system purging itself in panic. Too late. Everything had already been backed up. Triple redundancy, off-site storage. The watchkeepers had been preparing for years. Malcolm's phone buzzed with a new message. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Be ready. In her office, Celeste signed the 17th reopened case file. Each signature, methodical, intentional. A restoration of something stolen? Her assistant placed a press release on her desk. The mayor approved this statement on your behalf. Celeste scanned it briefly. Corporate language, empty reassurances, isolated incidents, and full confidence in our officers. She drew a single line through the entire page. We're not releasing this. But the press is demanding. Let them demand. She returned to her signatures. Silence makes people uncomfortable. Good. They should be uncomfortable. The press conference room remained empty that afternoon. Reporters waited for a statement that never came. Cameras pointed at an unoccupied podium. Instead, a young officer distributed plain manila envelopes to each journalist. Inside, the official announcement of Reboot the Badge, a comprehensive review of all excessive force complaints over the past decade. 17 cases reopened, 9 officers placed on review, no quotes, no explanations, just facts. And at the bottom, a simple mission statement. What is hidden cannot heal. Rick found his locker plastered with printouts of his own face, frame captures from the videos, his expressions of rage, of contempt, of casual cruelty. The images had been enlarged, highlighting details he'd never noticed about himself. The vein that bulged in his forehead when shouting, the spittle at the corner of his mouth, the pleasure in his eyes when asserting dominance. He tore them down, crumpled them into balls. A younger officer watched from across the row, not hiding his observation. "Something to say," Rick challenged. The officer didn't flinch. "Not anymore. You've said enough for all of us." Grace Holloway hadn't spoken publicly in 3 years, not since her son's death in police custody. The official report called it suicide, said he'd somehow managed to hang himself with his own shoelaces, despite having his shoelaces confiscated during booking. Despite the bruising around his wrists and neck that didn't match the supposed method, despite her repeated insistence that her son had called her just before his death, frightened of the officers assigned to his cell block, one of whom was Richard Talbert. The community center hummed with nervous energy, standing room only. Celeste sat in the front row, no uniform, no entourage, just a notepad and pen. The moderator approached the microphone. "We're honored to announce the first community review session of the Reboot the Badge initiative. Today we'll hear from families affected by cases being reopened." Grace Holloway rose slowly from her seat. 67 years old, back straight as a rod. She adjusted her glasses, smoothed her blouse, the rituals of someone preparing to finally be heard. "My son's name was Marcus. He was 23 when they killed him." The room collectively held its breath. Grace's voice never wavered. "They called it suicide, but his wrists were crushed, broken before death." She held up an autopsy photo the department had fought to suppress, now officially released as part of the review. "These are defensive wounds. My son fought for his life, and then they erased him." From the back of the room, a reporter called out, "Mrs. Holloway, what do you hope comes from reopening the case?" Grace looked directly at Celeste. "Not hope, expectation. I expect the truth to finally matter." Celeste remained seated throughout the 4-hour session. 17 families, 17 stories, 17 unheard voices. She didn't speak, didn't offer reassurances or promises, just listened, documented, witnessed. At the end, a reporter thrust a microphone toward her. "Chief Monroe, what's your response to these testimonies?" Celeste stood, gathered her notes, considered the question. "The less I speak, the louder the system reveals itself." Then she walked out, leaving the cameras focused on the families instead of herself, where the attention belonged. Rick found himself assigned to evidence inventory, basement level, no public contact, 8 hours of counting seized items, cataloging contraband, updating databases, busy work designed for rookies and those being pushed toward retirement. His new partner was Officer Eliza Gomez, 5 years on the force, one of the officers he'd harassed out of patrol duty 2 years earlier. "This is bullshit," he muttered, slamming a box onto the shelf. Eliza didn't look up from her clipboard. "Funny, that's exactly what I said when you had me transferred for emotional instability after I reported you." 3 former officers gathered at a coffee shop across from the precinct. All had left the force within months of filing complaints against Rick Talbert. All had been labeled troublemakers, unreliable, not team players. All had received the same email from Chief Monroe's office: "Your testimony matters. Your experience matters. Your truth matters." David Washburn stirred his coffee slowly. "I won't do it. They'll just bury it again." Michael Chen shook his head. "Different leadership now." "Same system," David insisted. Jamal Wilson placed his phone on the table. A video played Rick threatening Jamal after he'd filed his complaint 3 years earlier. "I've had this recording for years. Never showed anyone, because who would believe me over him?" He paused, looked at the others. "But I'm not carrying his secret anymore. I'm done protecting his badge instead of mine." The television interview was supposed to be routine, a standard introduction of the new police chief to the community. The host smiled his practiced smile. "Chief Monroe, you've been unusually quiet about the recent video releases and allegations against officers in your department. Why the silence on such important matters?" Celeste adjusted her glasses slightly, the only indication she'd registered the question. "The system has spoken for too long, defending itself, excusing itself. My voice isn't needed for that conversation. But surely as the new chief, I've reviewed 38 hours of footage showing officers abusing their authority. I've read 94 complaints that were dismissed without investigation. I've met with 17 families still waiting for answers. She leaned forward slightly. The less I speak, the louder the system reveals itself. That's the second time you've used that phrase. What exactly do you mean? When power falls silent, truth rises to fill the space. Malcolm received the encrypted file at exactly 3:17 a.m., labeled simply the Rick Files. Inside 12 years of documented incidents, 16 video clips, 8 never before seen, 3 with formal complaints that had been dismissed, and personnel records showing each investigator who had cleared Rick, each supervisor who had defended him, each colleague who had supported his version of events. A comprehensive map of systemic protection. Malcolm uploaded everything to the secure server, then sent the confirmation message materials received. Distribution protocols initiated. By morning, every news outlet in the state would have access. Every officer named in the files would be notified. Every thread in the tapestry of silence suddenly visible. The precinct erupted in chaos the next morning. Officers huddled around computers. Phones buzzed constantly. Urgent meetings behind closed doors. No one spoke to Rick directly, but every conversation was about him, about the newly released footage showing him pressing a high school student's face against a patrol car for looking at me wrong, about witness statements from fellow officers describing Rick planting evidence in a suspect's car, about the pattern, the protection, the complicity. Rick retreated to the men's room, locked himself in a stall, hands shaking so badly he couldn't type a response to his wife's frantic messages. They're saying you did what? Please tell me this isn't true. Celeste received the files simultaneously with the media. No warning, no special treatment. Exactly as she'd instructed the watchkeepers. She needed to be surprised alongside everyone else. Needed her reactions to be genuine. Needed to be a witness, not an orchestrator. Her assistant burst into the office. Chief, have you seen? Yes. Celeste closed her laptop. Schedule a department-wide meeting. Mandatory attendance. When? Now. The briefing room had never been so quiet. Officers lined the walls, filled every chair. No one wanting to be absent for what was coming. Celeste stood at the podium. No notes, no prepared statement. I've reviewed the materials released this morning, as have most of you. Heads nodded, eyes averted. These videos and reports reveal not just the actions of Officer Talbert, but the system that protected him. That system remains in place. It remains active. She scanned the room slowly, making eye contact with each officer. Each of you has a choice to make today. Not about Officer Talbert. He has made his choices. This is about who you choose to be in response. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Some of you actively protected him. Some witnessed and remained silent. Some looked away deliberately. Each response was a choice. She placed her badge on the podium. Let it sit there, visible to everyone. This badge means nothing if it protects the wrong people. Ask yourselves who you've been protecting and why. Rick wasn't invited to the meeting, found himself locked out of the briefing room. Through the small window in the door, he watched his colleagues listen to Celeste, saw their expressions shift from defensive to contemplative, saw 20 years of brotherhood dissolving in real time. His access card failed at the evidence room, at the file storage area, at the personnel department, invisible barriers materializing around him, digital walls closing in. By noon, his name had been removed from the duty roster. His email returned error messages, erased from the system he'd relied upon for protection. Jacob Williams, Jerome's younger brother, had become a civil rights attorney because of what happened to his family, had spent 12 years building cases against officers like Rick Talbert, had lost most of them. Now his inbox filled with messages from former clients, from colleagues, from journalists, all asking the same question. Did this change everything? He drafted a careful email to the address provided by the watchkeepers. We stayed quiet once. Never again. But we need to know, is there more? Are you finished or just beginning? The response came within minutes. Officer Talbert is not an anomaly. He is a symptom. We have documented 43 officers with similar patterns across 17 precincts. This was never about one man. Jacob sat back in his chair. Read the message 3 times. Then began drafting a class action lawsuit that would reshape policing in the entire state. Rick's home had become a fortress under siege. Cameras on the lawn, reporters calling constantly, neighbors crossing the street to avoid proximity. His teenage daughter hadn't gone to school in 3 days. His wife had taken leave from her teaching position. "They're saying things about you," his daughter said quietly over dinner, showing videos. Rick pushed his food around the plate. "People lie. Videos can be edited." "Dad," her voice cracked slightly, "I saw them. That was you." The silence that followed felt like a family breaking. Celeste worked late every night that week, reviewing files, meeting with attorneys, preparing for the lawsuits that had already begun, not fighting them, facilitating them, justice flowing in its proper direction for once. Her assistant knocked softly. "There's someone here to see you. Says he's expected." Malcolm Chen entered without waiting for a response. Closed the door behind him. "The watchkeepers sent me." Celeste didn't seem surprised. "I assumed they would eventually. We need to know if you're prepared for what comes next." He placed a flash drive on her desk. "This contains evidence on 9 more officers. Same patterns, same protection networks. The same approach will work." Malcolm shook his head. "These cases are worse, and these officers have more powerful connections." Celeste picked up the drive, weighed it in her palm. "Good." The police union representative looked uncomfortable in Celeste's office. "Chief Monroe, while we support transparency, the manner in which Officer Talbert has been treated sets a dangerous precedent." Celeste listened silently. "The union has concerns about due process, about proper channels, about the presumption of innocence." She folded her hands on the desk. "Did you express these same concerns when the 17 victims requested investigations? When their evidence was dismissed without review? When their testimonies were disregarded?" The representative shifted in his seat. "That's not the same. It's exactly the same. The system designed to protect has been protecting the wrong people. The union cannot support this witch hunt." "I'm not asking for support." Celeste opened a folder, pushed it across the desk. "I'm providing notice. These 9 officers will be placed on administrative leave tomorrow." The representative scanned the names. His face paled. "This is half the senior patrol division." "Yes, it is." Rick drafted his public apology letter at his kitchen table, erased and rewrote each sentence multiple times, searching for the right words, the right tone of contrition without admission of specific guilt, the right balance of remorse without legal liability. "I recognize that my actions have fallen short of the high standards expected of a police officer. Generic, sanitized, safe." He posted it to his social media accounts, sent copies to local news outlets. No one shared it. No one commented. No one acknowledged it at all. His message vanished into the digital void, his words finally as invisible as his victims had been. The disciplinary hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday, standard procedure. Rick arrived early, wore his best suit, prepared his defense carefully. The conference room felt colder than he remembered, the long table emptier, no handshakes offered, no casual conversation before proceedings began. The review board entered 5 senior officers and 2 civilian oversight members. Rick extended his hand to Captain Rodriguez, who had been his supervisor for 8 years. Rodriguez looked at the offered hand, then took his seat without acknowledging it. In that moment, Rick understood what was happening. He wasn't there to defend himself. He was there to witness his excommunication. Malcolm monitored the department's digital pulse from his workstation. The internal messaging system overflowed with urgent communications. Senior officers demanding explanations, mid-level supervisors distancing themselves from past decisions, patrol officers scrambling to review their own histories. A system in crisis always reveals its true architecture. Who protects whom? Who sacrifices whom? Who survives? Malcolm documented it all. Every frantic deletion, every hasty revision of reports, every attempt to rewrite history, all preserved for the Watchkeeper's archives, all proving Celeste's core thesis: the system would expose itself if simply given enough silence to fill. Young officers gathered in the break room, voices low, expressions earnest. Sergeant James Chen, no relation to Malcolm, spread papers across the table. This is the training reform proposal. We need 20 signatures to submit it officially. Officer Rodriguez examined the document. De-escalation training, implicit bias recognition, community oversight of disciplinary measures. Everything we should have had years ago, James said. The old guard will fight this. The old guard is currently fighting for their jobs. James gestured toward the television showing footage of protests outside the precinct. We need to relearn, not how to command, but how to listen. Pens moved across the signature page. 23 names by meeting's end. A reformation beginning from within. The courthouse steps were crowded for Rick's formal hearing, not with supporters, not with fellow officers, but with former victims, with community members, with the faces that had appeared in those videos, standing silent, watching, witnessing. Rick kept his eyes forward as he climbed the steps, tried to maintain the confident stride that had carried him through 2 decades of unquestioned authority. His foot slipped on the 3rd step, a small stumble. No one reached out to steady him. Inside the courtroom, the balance of power had visibly shifted. The police department's attorneys sat subdued, their usual confidence replaced by resignation. The plaintiffs' side overflowed with legal representation. Civil rights attorneys, class action specialists, law school professors documenting precedent. Rick took his seat at the defense table, alone except for his union-appointed lawyer. The door opened, Celeste entered, took a seat in the back row, just watching, as she had from the beginning. The judge entered. Everyone rose except Rick, his legs suddenly unable to support his weight. For the first time, he felt the true gravity of everything collapsing around him. The settlement negotiations lasted 11 hours. Rick's career, his pension, his professional standing, all bargaining chips in a game he no longer controlled. By evening, the terms were set: resignation, reduced benefits, no admission of criminal liability, but no contest to the civil claims. His name would remain in police databases, his record permanently marked. Rick signed each page mechanically, his signature growing less confident with each document. The final form required his badge and gun card. He placed them on the table, the physical symbols of authority he'd wielded so carelessly, now just metal and plastic, stripped of meaning. Celeste returned to her office after the hearing. The settlement was sufficient. Not perfect, but better than the system had ever produced before. Her assistant entered with the day's reports. The media is calling it a victory. It's not a victory, Celeste replied. It's the bare minimum of accountability. But it's progress. Progress would be these cases never happening again. She removed her glasses, rubbed her eyes briefly. This is just cleaning up what should never have been dirty. On her desk, the flash drive from Malcolm glowed with its small indicator light. 9 more officers, 9 more cases, 9 more reckonings. Just the beginning. Rick sat in his car in the courthouse parking garage, 3 hours after the hearing ended, still unable to drive home, unable to face his family with the reality of what he'd lost, of what he'd done. His phone displayed dozens of missed calls, messages he couldn't bear to read. The dashboard clock blinked steadily, counting seconds that felt impossibly long, time moving differently when accountability finally arrives. A tap on his window startled him. Officer Eliza Gomez stood outside his car, the rookie he'd harassed off patrol duty, now wearing the badge he'd surrendered. Rick lowered the window. Come to gloat. Eliza's expression remained neutral. No, I came to say something I couldn't say before. What's that? I saw what you did to that Williams kid. I had dash cam footage that disappeared from evidence. Rick's jaw tightened. So you're part of this witch hunt too. It's not a hunt when the evidence is real. She straightened her uniform jacket. I kept a copy, gave it to the new chief last week. Why tell me this now? Because I needed you to know that your silence didn't work, that truth finds a way. She turned to leave, then paused. And because I wanted to see your face when you realized how many of us were watching all along. Celeste entered the precinct early the next morning. Officers nodded respectfully as she passed, a different energy from when she'd first arrived. Not fear, not resentment, something closer to relief. The weight of corrupted silence finally lifted. In her office, a single envelope waited on her desk. Inside, a list of officers requesting transfers to community outreach positions, training roles, mentorship programs. The note attached read simply, "We need to relearn. We're ready." Beneath it, a second envelope, smaller, personal, a handwritten letter from Grace Holloway. Chief Monroe. My son would have been 30 today. For the first time since his death, I feel like someone is listening. Not just hearing, but truly listening. Your silence speaks volumes, and we're finally hearing it. With gratitude, Grace Celeste traced her fingers over the words. The first tears she'd allowed herself since taking the position, welling in her eyes. Not victory, not yet, but the first fragile roots of healing, taking hold in ground that had been silent too long. 6 weeks after the courthouse incident, Rick Talbert's name had been systematically erased. Not from public memory. There it remained indelible, a case study in abuse of power, but from the systems he'd once controlled. His department profile archived, his badge number reassigned, his locker emptied and reallocated, his email bounced back with user unknown, his access codes returned invalid credentials. A digital excommunication, clinical, complete. Even his parking space had been reassigned, the small nameplate removed overnight, as if the building itself was rejecting his memory. Rick stood in line at the supermarket. Third application that week. The manager reviewed his resume with furrowed brows. You left the police department recently. Administrative separation, Rick mumbled, the euphemism agreed upon during settlement. And your duties included evidence management, security protocols, public safety compliance, sanitized language for 2 decades of patrol work, for the authority he'd wielded like a weapon. The manager's eyes flickered with recognition. Wait, are you the officer from those videos? Rick's stomach tightened. There's been a lot of context missing from those. I'll be in touch if there's a fit. The manager handed back the application. Incomplete, unsigned. We have several candidates to consider. The familiar dismissal, the polite rejection, a pattern repeating across the city. The elementary school administrator was more direct. We can't have you as security staff, Mr. Talbert. Surely you understand. Rick shifted in the too small chair. I have 20 years of experience. I know how to keep children safe. Yes, well, the administrator closed his file. The parents would have concerns. About what I've never had any incidents involving children. The Williams boy, in the video, he was 7. Rick's jaw tightened. I wasn't dealing with him. It was his father who was restrained in front of his child while you made comments about raising them right. The administrator stood. Interview's over, Mr. Talbert. Another door closed. Another path blocked. The world shrinking around him daily. Celeste reviewed the Community Oversight Committee applications spread across her desk. 37 citizens, 17 former officers, 9 social workers. A new framework taking shape, built on transparency rather than protection, on accountability rather than loyalty. Her assistant entered with the quarterly statistics. Complaints against officers down 63%, community engagement up 47%. Celeste nodded. Progress measured in percentages, in data points, in shifted patterns. In the Reboot the Badge initiative, 23 cases reopened, 17 settlements reached, 4 still in negotiation. Numbers that represented lives, families, justice delayed but finally in motion. The 9 officers from Phase 2, 4 resignations, 3 suspensions pending investigation, 2 reassigned to desk duty with mandatory retraining. Celeste made a note in her personal ledger. Precise tallies of accountability, not victories. Just beginnings. Umainamashim. The O'Malley's bar sign flickered in the evening rain. Half the letters burn out. Rick's regular spot for 17 years, where fellow officers gathered after shifts, where his first round was always on the house, where his jokes always found appreciative audiences. He pushed through the door, water dripping from his civilian jacket. The usual crowd populated the bar stools, faces he'd known for decades. Conversation stopped as he entered. Eyes averted. The bartender Mike, who'd served him for 12 years, suddenly became very interested in wiping the same glass repeatedly. Rick approached his usual seat, found it occupied by a rookie he barely recognized. "Mind if I—" The words died in his throat as the young officer made deliberate eye contact, then turned away, continuing his conversation as if Rick were invisible. Rick retreated to a back table, sat alone with his beer. The television above the bar played silently, captions scrolling across footage of the protests still happening outside the precinct, signs reading "No More Silence" and "Watch the Watchman," the occasional image of his own face, now a symbol, a shorthand for systemic failure. Officer Davis, 10 years his junior, once his biggest admirer, approached the table. Rick straightened. "Davis, good to see a friendly—" "I'm not staying." Davis placed an envelope on the table. "The guys took up a collection to help with expenses while you figure things out." Charity from men who'd once called him brother. "I don't need handouts." "It's not a handout. It's recognition for your years of service." "You mean a payoff to stay away?" Davis didn't deny it, just slid the envelope closer. "Take it or don't, but don't come back here, Rick. It's harder for everyone." Rick drove aimlessly after leaving the bar, past the precinct where he'd spent 23 years, past the courthouse where he'd lost everything, past the park where he'd once patrolled with unquestioned authority. Rain streaked across his windshield, distorting familiar landmarks into watery impressions. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife. "Where are you? Dinner's cold." He didn't answer, couldn't face another evening of strained silence, of his daughter's accusing glances, of the moving boxes slowly filling the garage as they prepared to leave the city, to escape a reputation that would follow them regardless. The motel room was sparse, anonymous, fitting. Rick sat on the edge of the bed, television playing news he wasn't watching. His phone displayed the draft of his public apology letter, version 16, each iteration more desperate than the last, each attempting to explain what he himself didn't fully understand, how casual cruelty had become habit, how power had become identity, how he'd become someone his own family couldn't defend. He posted the letter to his social media accounts, sent copies to news outlets again. No responses, no acknowledgement, just digital silence, a void where his voice once commanded attention. The disciplinary hearing for the 9 officers identified in Phase 2 proceeded differently than Rick's had. They arrived together, solidarity in numbers, confidence in the system that had always protected them. The room was packed with supporters, fellow officers, union representatives, department attorneys. Captain Reynolds, 30 years on the force, head of Vice, spoke for the group. "These allegations are baseless. These officers have impeccable records." The review board chair, a civilian oversight appointee, slid documents across the table. "Impeccable because they were sanitized. These are the original complaint forms, before they were altered. 9 folders, each containing evidence that had been systematically removed, testimonies that had disappeared, footage that had been deleted, all preserved by the watchkeepers, all restored to official record." The room fell silent as reality shifted beneath their feet. Celeste watched the proceedings from the back row, silent, observing, her presence a reminder of new expectations. When the officers glanced back seeking the familiar protection of rank, they found only her steady gaze. No rescue coming, no system interventions, just accountability finally functioning as designed. One by one, their confidence cracked, body language shifting from defiance to resignation. The collapse of privilege was always the same. First disbelief, then outrage, then the slow realization that the rules had always existed. They had simply never applied before. The union representative requested a recess after 2 hours. The 9 officers huddled in the hallway. Voices urgent. Options diminishing. This is a witch hunt. They can't do this to senior officers. Who's leaking this material? Someone's violating department protocols. Captain Reynolds silenced them with a raised hand. The problem isn't the leaks. It's that the material exists at all. The uncomfortable truth settling over the group. The problem wasn't exposure. It was what had been exposed. Eliza Gomez had been promoted to patrol sergeant, a position she'd been denied 3 times under the previous leadership, each denial citing insufficient experience or temperament concerns, code for refusing to participate in the culture of silence. Now she led roll call for the evening shift. Officers who had once ignored her now waited for her instructions. The Community Oversight Committee will be conducting ride-alongs starting tonight. 2 observers per district. Groans from the veteran officers. Eye rolls. Muttered complaints. This isn't optional, Eliza continued. This is the new standard. Transparency isn't a punishment. It's protection for the community and for us. A rookie raised his hand. Sergeant, what if they interfere with our procedures? They're not there to interfere. They're there to witness, to ensure that what we say happened is what actually happened. The simple accountability that had been missing for decades. Malcolm monitored the implementation from his workstation. New body cameras with cloud backup, new reporting systems with civilian oversight access, technology rebuilding what trust could not. His phone vibrated with a message from the watchkeepers, Phase 3 initiated. Monitor system response. He opened the secured folder labeled Expansion Protocol. Inside evidence implicating 17 officers across 6 neighboring jurisdictions. The pattern spreading beyond city limits, beyond one department. A regional accountability revolution beginning with a single spark. Rick sat across from his attorney in a sterile conference room. The civil suits are mounting. 7 more plaintiffs this week. Rick stared at the stack of papers. Names of people he barely remembered. Incidents that had blurred together in a career built on dominance. What are my options? The attorney sighed. Limited. Your settlement with the department didn't cover civil liability. Your union protection ended with your resignation. So I fight each case. On what grounds the video evidence is substantial? Rick's hands clenched beneath the table. They're trying to destroy me. No, Rick. The attorney closed the folder. They're trying to be heard. Finally. The community forum filled the high school auditorium to capacity. Citizens, officers, city officials, media. Celeste sat on stage with the newly formed oversight committee, still in civilian clothes, still without her uniform. The symbolism deliberate. Authority derived from accountability, not from symbols. Grace Holloway approached the microphone. The room quieted instantly. For 3 years, I've asked for the complete footage from my son's final hours. For 3 years, I was told it didn't exist. She held up a DVD case. Yesterday, I received this, the complete surveillance video from my son's cell block. Her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. I haven't watched it yet. I don't know if I can, but I know that having the truth is my right, is everyone's right. The applause began slowly, built to a standing ovation. Truth valued more than comfort, more than protection, more than silence. The 9 officers from Phase 2 accepted their disciplinary actions without further appeal. 4 resignations, 3 suspensions, 2 reassignments, each punished according to their level of misconduct, each held accountable in proportion to their actions. No single scapegoat, no sacrificial offering to protect the rest. Just the systematic application of rules that had always existed on paper, now finally enforced in reality. Rick's savings were depleted by month 3. Legal fees, mortgage payments on a house that wouldn't sell, daily expenses that continued regardless of income. His wife had found work in a neighboring city, commuting 2 hours each way rather than relocating their daughter mid-school year. Their conversations had become transactional, logistical, emptied of connection. The Jenkins across the street are having a barbecue, she mentioned while sorting bills. Did they invite us? She didn't look up. No, just thought you should know, in case you see cars outside. The isolation extending beyond him, enveloping his family, the collateral damage of his actions spreading like ripples. Rick stood in the grocery store checkout line, hat pulled low, shoulders hunched, trying to remain anonymous in a city where his face had become notorious. The cashier scanned his items without making eye contact, the practiced indifference of retail work, until she reached his store loyalty card. Her eyes flickered with recognition. You're him, the cop from the videos. The couple behind him in line looked up. Whispers started. Rick kept his gaze on the payment terminal, swiped his card without responding. Declined, the cashier announced, loudly, unnecessarily public. Heat rushed to his face. Try again. Still declined. More whispers, more attention. Rick abandoned the groceries, walked out with empty hands, the public humiliation complete. Celeste signed the final approval for the department's restructuring plan. New training protocols, new oversight mechanisms, new accountability standards, built on the ashes of the old system, on the lessons learned from its failures. Her assistant placed a newspaper on her desk. The headline bold, Watchkeepers, expand focus. 3 more departments under scrutiny. Celeste read the article carefully. Evidence emerging in neighboring jurisdictions. Similar patterns identified. The accountability contagion spreading, not through her direct action, but through the example set, through the permission to speak that silence had paradoxically granted. The city council meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. Standard procedure. Rick arrived early, sat in the back row, anonymous among concerned citizens. The agenda included budget approvals, zoning requests, routine municipal business, and item 17, discussion of Community Safety Review Board findings. The chamber filled as the hour approached. More attendees than usual. More media, more attention. Rick hunched lower in his seat, hat brim shadowing his face, until a young man sat beside him, tablet in hand, university ID hanging from his neck. Excuse me, aren't you Officer Talbert? Rick stiffened. Former officer. I'm doing my thesis on police accountability reforms. Would you be willing to comment on the changes since your departure? As if he were a historical figure, a case study, as if his life's collapse were simply an academic interest. No comment. The young man persisted. Your perspective would be valuable. Few officers in your position have spoken publicly. Because no one wants to hear it, Rick muttered. I do. The student's expression seemed genuine. I'm interviewing everyone involved, including some of the citizens who filed complaints against you. Rick's attention sharpened. Which ones? Jerome Williams, Grace Holloway, Min June Park. Names that had once been merely paperwork, now people with stories being told, being heard. What did they say about me? The student checked his notes. Mr. Williams said you seemed to genuinely believe you were doing the right thing, that the system had convinced you that your actions were justified. Not the condemnation Rick had expected, something more complex, more human. Can I show you something? The student opened a video file. This is from yesterday's community forum. On screen, Jerome Williams stood at a microphone. Older than Rick remembered, more confident. I don't want Officer Talbert erased, Jerome was saying. I want him understood. I want what happened to him, what the system did to him, understood. So it doesn't create more like him. Rick stared at the screen, at the man he'd once pinned against a patrol car, now advocating for understanding rather than erasure. Something broke inside him, some final defense against reality. The council meeting began. Rick barely registered the proceedings, his mind replaying that video, those words. I don't want him erased. I want him understood. The grace in that statement, the humanity he himself had failed to show. The chairman called item 17. The room's energy shifted instantly. Celeste Monroe approached the podium, her first public address to the council. The Community Safety Review Board has completed its initial assessment. Our findings are detailed in the report before you. Her voice steady, authoritative without being authoritarian. We identified 47 cases requiring reopening, 17 officers requiring remedial action, 9 requiring termination. Facts without embellishment, truth without commentary. The pattern revealed is not one of individual failure, but of systematic protection of misconduct, of institutional silence that enabled abuse. Rick felt eyes turning toward him, his presence recognized despite his attempts at anonymity. This was never about a single officer, or a single incident, or a single failure. She looked up from her notes, her gaze sweeping the room, pausing briefly on Rick, acknowledging without condemning. This was about a system that taught some people they were above accountability and taught others they were beneath justice. Rick slipped out before the meeting ended, couldn't bear the stares, the whispers, the recognition. His car, once a symbol of authority with its custom plate, identifying him as law enforcement, now just transportation, anonymized with a standard plate. With the removal of department parking stickers, he sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. The student's words echoed in his mind. The system had convinced you that your actions were justified. Not absolution, but context. The first framing of his behavior that didn't reduce him to monster or martyr. That acknowledged the machinery that had shaped him. Eliza Gomez led the evening patrol briefing. Officers gathered in the roll call room. Tonight we implement Phase 1 of the Community Engagement Initiative. Each patrol pair will include one officer and one community representative. Groans from veteran officers. Eye rolls. The resistance to change manifesting in small rebellions. This isn't punishment, Eliza continued. This is relationship building. This is trust restoration. Officer Davis raised his hand. With all due respect, Sergeant, putting civilians in our cars compromises tactical response options. The old argument, security versus transparency. These aren't random civilians. They're trained community ambassadors, and they're not there to interfere. They're there to witness. She scanned the room, making eye contact with each officer. We need to relearn, not how to command, but how to listen. The email arrived in Celeste's inbox at precisely midnight, from an anonymous address, subject line empty, inside a single video file, no text, no explanation. The footage showed Rick Talbert sitting alone in his car in the council meeting parking lot, head in his hands, shoulders shaking, the timestamp 90 minutes earlier, the watchkeepers still watching, still documenting, even in moments of private reckoning. Celeste closed the file without finishing it. Some boundaries deserved respect, even for those who had shown none. Rick applied for a security position at the mall 2 towns over, where his face might not be recognized, where his name might not carry its burden. The manager reviewed his application with professional detachment. Your experience is impressive, Mr. Talbert. Law enforcement background is valuable in retail security. Hope flickered briefly, the first positive response in months. However, we do have concerns about your separation from the police department. The familiar phrasing, the diplomatic rejection forming. Rick interrupted. I made mistakes, serious ones. I abused my authority. I treated people unfairly based on race and class. The words he hadn't been able to write in 16 drafts of his apology. The truth he'd been avoiding even as evidence mounted around him. I'm not asking you to ignore that. I'm asking for a chance to work differently, to be different. The manager studied him, surprise replacing professional distance. That's not the response I expected. It's not the response I would have given a month ago. Truth. Finally. Celeste received the Community Oversight Committee's first quarterly report. Excessive force complaints down 78%. Civilian commendations up 42%. Officer retention among minorities and women improved 37%. Numbers that represented cultural shift, systemic transformation. The assistant placed a second report beside it. The 9 officers from Phase 2. Status update as requested. Celeste scanned the document, 4 had left law enforcement entirely. 3 were completing retraining programs. 2 had become advocates for reform within their new departments. Consequences creating change. Accountability fostering growth, not punishment for its own sake, but redirection toward better paths. The press conference podium stood empty for 11 minutes. Reporters checked watches, shifted impatiently, whispered questions about the delay. Then Jerome Williams entered from the side door, followed by Grace Holloway, by Min Jun Park, by 17 other individuals who had filed complaints against officers. They formed a line behind the podium, no police presence, no official representatives. Just citizens claiming space in the system that had ignored them. Jerome approached the microphone. We've been asked repeatedly what justice looks like to us, what outcome we want from these investigations. The room fell silent. Cameras focused, attention finally where it belonged. Justice isn't punishment. Justice is change. Justice is truth being valued more than comfort. He gestured to the group behind him. We aren't asking for vengeance. We're asking for voice, for the system to hear us as clearly as it has always heard others. Grace Holloway stepped forward. My son can't be brought back, but the conditions that led to his death can be dismantled. Their message clear, their presence powerful, the true authority in the room. Rick started the mall security position on a Wednesday. Minimum wage, no benefits, weeknight shifts, a uniform without authority, a role without power. He patrolled the quiet corridors, past closed storefronts, past cleaning crews working in silent efficiency, past the food court where teenagers gathered, laughing, testing boundaries. His first test came at 10:17 p.m., a group of young men, diverse, loud, breaking no specific rules but disturbing the expected quiet. The old Rick would have approached with dominance, with presumed authority, with the expectation of immediate compliance. The new Rick approached with a nod. Evening, guys, mall's closing in about 15 minutes. No commands, no demands, just information offered neutrally. One young man, black, around 17, met his gaze directly. Challenge in his stance. The old trigger, the perceived disrespect that once would have escalated instantly. We're heading out, the teen said. Just finishing our food. Rick nodded. Appreciate it. Take your time. Just wanted to give you the heads up. He continued his patrol. No confrontation, no power struggle. Just a small interaction completed without dominance or submission. A tiny victory in the long work of becoming someone new. Celeste's office remained minimalist, functional, without the typical trappings of authority, no wall of photographs with politicians, no displayed commendations, no ego shelf, just the tools needed for the work at hand. She reviewed the final implementation plan for the Reboot the Badge initiative. Phase 3 would extend accountability measures to neighboring jurisdictions, create regional standards for conduct and transparency, build firewalls against the spread of problematic officers from one department to another. Her assistant knocked softly. Chief, there's someone here to see you. Says she's expected. A young woman entered, early 30s, professional attire, intelligent eyes. My name is Diana Reyes. The watchkeeper sent me. Celeste didn't seem surprised. Phase 3. Yes, we've identified patterns in 6 neighboring jurisdictions, evidence of the same protection networks. And you need my support for implementation. Diana shook her head. We need your example, your blueprint, your silence that speaks volumes. She placed a flash drive on the desk. These officers aren't like Talbert. They're smarter, more careful, more connected, but just as documented. More so, we've been watching longer, building stronger cases. Celeste picked up the drive, considered its weight, its potential. The pattern remains the same. Silence until exposure, denial until evidence, resistance until change becomes inevitable. Diana nodded. Will you help us replicate what you've built here? I'll do better. Celeste opened her drawer, removed a folder labeled Regional Accountability Network. I've been expecting you for weeks. Rick returned home after his shift. 2 a.m., house quiet, his wife's car in the driveway, his daughter's lights still on despite the hour. He entered silently, removed his shoes, placed his new ID badge on the counter. Mall security, Paul Wilkins, supervisor. His first direct superior who didn't know his history, who saw only his current work. His daughter's door opened as he passed, 16 years old, once his greatest admirer, recently his most painful judge. Dad, he paused. Hey, sorry if I woke you. I was up. How was work? The first time she'd asked in months. The first genuine interest in his new life. Different, quieter, better, I think. She studied his face, looking for truth, for change. A guy from school works at that mall. Miguel. His mom cleans offices there. Rick nodded, uncertain where this was heading. He said you were nice to her, that you actually learned her name, that the last security guy never spoke to the cleaning staff. Small actions. Noticed unexpectedly. She's working the same building as me. Why wouldn't I learn her name? His daughter leaned against the doorframe. The old you wouldn't have. The simplest assessment, the most accurate. No, the old me wouldn't have. Progress measured not in grand gestures, but in small human recognitions, in names remembered, in respect offered without calculation, in silence broken where it needed breaking. Celeste sat alone in her office after hours, the final stack of reopened cases before her, each representing a failure of the system, each representing an opportunity for correction. She opened the bottom drawer of her desk, removed a leather-bound notebook. On its cover, embossed in simple text, things that need cleaning. Inside, lists dating back 15 years. Cases, officers, patterns identified long before she had the authority to address them. Names crossed off methodically as accountability found them. Rick Talbert's name, the 9 officers from Phase 2, the 17 from neighboring jurisdictions, a record of silence observed, of injustice documented, of patience exercised. She turned to a fresh page, wrote the date, then added a final line, never allow a man like him to have a second copy. No punctuation, no emphasis, just truth finally given voice through action rather than words. She closed the book, replaced it in the drawer, the work continuing, the silence breaking where needed, the system slowly healing through exposure to its own reflection. No one was killed, yet 4 officers resigned, 9 were disciplined, 17 cases reopened. No one screamed for justice, yet an entire police department fell silent that day, recalibrated its understanding of power. Celeste Monroe never raised her voice, never gave fiery speeches, never positioned herself as a revolutionary. She simply removed the protective covers that had hidden truth. Let sunlight disinfect what darkness had preserved. Let silence create the space for long-ignored voices to finally be heard. The system hadn't broken suddenly. It had eroded gradually, through small permissions, through collective looking away, through comfortable silences that protected the wrong people, until someone chose a different kind of silence, one that observed, documented, witnessed, one that refused the easy cooperation that oppression requires to function. Have you ever stayed silent when you saw someone humiliated, looked away when power was abused, told yourself it wasn't your place to intervene? Next time, will you still turn away? Or will you remember that your silence is a choice, that observation is an act, that witnessing is power, that systems cannot heal what they refuse to see, and that sometimes the loudest statement is simply to watch, to remember, to wait, and when the moment comes to reveal every second of truth you've collected. Let silence mark the space where justice begins.